We're in Manila, standing in front of a historic building. It is the palace that was occupied by the Spanish viceroys, subsequently by the governors general representing the United States, including William Howard Taft and Douglas MacArthur. During the war, a Philippine president occupied it, subject to the Japanese administration. It is now the home of the president of the Philippines, Ferdinand Marcos, with whom we'll spend the next hour. Ferdinand Edralin Marcos is the president of the Philippines, elected to that office in 1965, re-elected in 1969, and, so to speak, institutionalized in power by a series of military, political, and juridical acts that followed the promulgation of martial law on September 22nd, 1972. Although in recent weeks President Marcos has said that there will be free elections or a referendum perhaps a year from now, there is no surviving constitutional mechanism that requires him to call them. The existing situation, his phrase, is called constitutional authoritarianism. Ferdinand Marcos was born in 1917, and by the time the Japanese invaded the Philippines after Pearl Harbor, he had acquired a reputation as a brilliant young lawyer, first in his class at the university, fluent in several languages. During the occupation, he distinguished himself by successive acts of ingenuity and heroism that brought him more decorations than any other Filipino, including 2 Silver Stars from the U.S. Army and a recommendation for the Congressional Medal of Honor. He survived the Bataan Death March, escaped a Japanese death camp, helped organize the resistance, and ended the war as a colonel in the Philippine Army. He turned to politics and was elected to the House of Representatives and subsequently to the Senate. In 1954, he married his famous wife, the former Imelda Romualdez, who is now governor of Greater Manila, and in the description of Foreign Secretary Carlos Romulo, de facto vice president of the Philippines. He acceded to the presidency when he defeated the incumbent, Diosdado Macapagal, by a heavy margin. In his foreign policy, President Marcos has recently sought to stress the Asiatic connection of the Philippines, resulting, some say, in a detachment from the traditional closeness with the United States, the strategic consequences of which are imponderable, which leads me to suggest that we should ponder them. I should like to begin by asking President Marcos whether it is his opinion that the failure of the United States to secure the independence of South Vietnam is largely responsible for the readjustment of your foreign policy.
No. Excuse me. Actually, the foreign policy of the Philippines is dictated by many factors, one of which is the fact that the Philippines has been identified before the war as a colony of the United States. It passed through a Commonwealth period. And having gone through 400 years of Spanish subjugation and conquest, and another 50 years of American occupation, the Philippines had somehow lost its original and indigenous culture. It became necessary for the Philippines, therefore, in order to reestablish its identity, and for the Filipino, especially the Filipino who was educated in Western ways, to retrace his roots. And retracing his roots, of course, discovered that he was Asian. More than anything else, the alluvium of Western culture was there. And so the Philippines became some kind of a melting pot of many cultures and many races. These varied inflows of not only cultures but also influences